Just because you wear a badge doesn't mean that you should be able to get away with anything that you want to get away with.
Where a couple is sharing their story.
After a late-night shift at his warehouse job, Damian Dorsey's fiancée Jessica picked him up to head home on May 19th. The couple's 5-month-old Beckham rode along in the back seat. Take a look at the surveillance videos obtained from a nearby business. At around 1 in the morning, the family stops at a light on Belmont Street in Brockton. Suddenly, an approaching SUV smashes into the back of their vehicle.
The crash was so bad that the headrests came out of the seats. It was literally like a bomb had gone off in our car.
This video was intended to inform and educate the public.
Hello everybody, and welcome once again to this video and this episode on the Junkyard News. Behind the blue line, that is the topic of today's video, which includes a possible cover-up and conspiracy to help clear a police officer who was potentially driving intoxicated, causing a crash, and ended up getting promoted for it. Let's get into it. Now, in the dark hours of the night, Sergeant Stanley David, a seasoned officer in a small but tight-knit police department, makes a choice that will set his life on an irreversible path, but one which show the world on what police cover-up and conspiracy truly looks like. After a night of drinking at a police event, Stanley finds himself at a local bar, drinking again, his mind clouded with the weight of the day and the allure of his comrades and his fellow officers in blue. His behavior, caught on video surveillance at the bar, becomes the first crack in his otherwise flawless career. You see, at around 1 a.m., although a little unsteady on his feet, as video shows, and with a possible blood alcohol level beyond legal limits, although we'll never know, Stanley stumbles out of the bar and into his personal vehicle, believing he is still in control. But fate did have other plans for him that night. As bar video surveillance sees him exiting the bar, it does look like he's a little unsteady on his feet. And as he was driving, he comes across a red light with a family, a father, a mother, and a child buckled in the back seat. Do you think this officer saw the red light, saw the vehicle that was stopped waiting for the light to turn green? Obviously not, as video from a nearby business shows the moment that this officer smashes into the back of this family's car. And witnesses on the scene are quick to speak out, noting the officer's erratic behavior. Witnesses on the scene were quick to speak out, noting that the driver of the offending vehicle seemed to be intoxicated.
They say witnesses at the scene reported that the driver of the other vehicle was intoxicated.
Hey, are they drinking? Are they drunk? Because my baby's in the car.
Yet when this officer's Blue Line brothers arrived on the scene, no sobriety tests were administered, and the officers claimed in their reports that they didn't see any signs of intoxication at all, even though this officer had admittedly consumed a good portion of alcohol during the evening. And it may not come as a shock or surprise that his Blue Line brothers, the men and women who stood beside him for years, are silent. No one dares to hold him accountable. And the police do not even write down or take statements from witnesses who claim that he was intoxicated after the accident.
But when the couple got a copy of the police report, it said no witnesses provided a statement to officers. They also noticed police did not conduct a field sobriety test.
I was angry. Had this been any other citizen, they would have been sobriety tested.
According to this internal affairs investigation, the 11 police officers interviewed about the incident said they didn't notice signs that David was intoxicated, and a lieutenant who responded to the scene eventually gave him a ride home. David told investigators that he had 3 to 4 vodka sodas at the police event and didn't recall what he drank later at the bar. The report also said David's story about the crash changed, first saying he might have dozed off behind the wheel and later saying he was distracted by his vehicle's audio screen.
They omitted any statement from their reports, not a one. The police chief opts for a meager 3-day unpaid suspension. A slap on the wrist that signals to everyone involved that loyalty to the badge transcends accountability. And to make matters worse, when this officer returns from his suspension, he is met not with the consequences of his actions, but with a promotion to lieutenant. Now this Leo, with his career untouched, his reputation unscathed, as he dons his new rank, Stanley faces the bitter truth: in a world behind the blue line, justice isn't always about right or wrong. It's about who you know and what you're willing to protect. And as this Leo steps into his new role as lieutenant, the questions still linger. Will he continue to shield the flawed system that saved him? Or will the weight of his conscience eventually break through the blue veil of silence? That is the question we pose to you today, but I highly doubt it. Here's some news clips about the story. Be careful, people. I'm telling you, you just never know when something like this is going to happen to you, and you don't know when your next encounter with a Leo is going to have you featured in our next video. Thanks again.
Well, tonight, Small Town Secrets takes us to Brockton, where a couple is sharing their story. An off-duty police officer smashed into their car late at night with their baby boy sitting right in the back seat.
But months later, they're still waiting for answers about how the crash was handled and whether the officer will be held accountable.
There was nobody on the road. It was a complete ghost town at that time.
Take a look at the surveillance video the investigators obtained from a nearby business. At around 1 in the morning, the family stops at a light on Belmont Street in Brockton. Suddenly, an approaching SUV smashes into the back of their vehicle.
The crash was so bad that the headrests came out of the seats. It was literally like a bomb had gone off in our car.
According to the crash report, the force of the collision pushed the couple's vehicle forward about 300 feet through the intersection.
To get rear-ended like that was something else. It gives me the chills. Panicking about my son. The trunk was almost in the back seat.
Before the couple and their baby went to the hospital, Damien remembers the reaction of witnesses who came to check on them.
They were outraged about this driver. They started shouting that he was under the influence of alcohol.
They were shouting that.
Oh, they were shouting that in the road.
But when Damien later got a copy of the police report, it said no witnesses provided a statement to police. He quickly noticed the driver only received a minor citation for a crash that caused all this damage to both vehicles. And police did not conduct a field sobriety test. That's when Damien learned the other driver was off-duty Brockton Sergeant Stanley David, who told fellow officers he may have dozed off momentarily before the collision. What was your reaction?
I was angry. Had this been any other citizen, they would have been sobriety tested. Just because you have a badge, it doesn't mean that you're any different than anybody else.
New video shows Brockton Police Sergeant Stanley David entering a local bar after attending a social event in May of 2023. After having at least one drink at the establishment, chatting with a bartender, and commiserating with other patrons, video shows David leaving at closing time around 1 a.m. Moments later, this was the aftermath of a crash David caused on Belmont Street. Surveillance video investigators first uncovered shows him smashing into another vehicle after it stopped for a red light. Inside the other car, fiancés Damian Dorsey and Jessica Nash with their 5-month-old baby boy riding in the back seat. According to this internal affairs investigation, the 11 police officers interviewed about the incident said they didn't notice signs that David was intoxicated, and a lieutenant who responded to the scene eventually gave him a ride home. David told investigators that he had 3 to 4 vodka sodas at the police event and didn't recall what he drank later at the bar. The report also said David's story about the crash changed, first saying he might have dozed off behind the wheel and later saying he was distracted by his vehicle's audio screen. Police Chief Brenda Perez imposed a 3-day unpaid suspension and wrote, "This decision is based on substantial evidence that underscores both poor judgment on your part and the subsequent damage to the reputation of the Brockton Police Department." David served his 3-day suspension earlier this month. He is currently next on the department's civil service list to be promoted to lieutenant if there's an opening. David didn't respond to our previous request for comment about the crash, but at a city council meeting this week, he spoke briefly as he accepted his promotion.
Just want to say thank you. I've been on the job for about 26 years. Appreciate everything you guys have done here, and I just want to say thank you, and I have a couple more years to serve the city of Brockton. Thank you.
As we previously told you, internal affairs investigators recommended no discipline for the crash, but Police Chief Brenda Perez said the incident reflected poorly on David and cast a shadow over the integrity of the entire department. A spokesperson for Mayor Robert Sullivan told me tonight he supports the police chief's decision to move forward on the promotion. The couple who first shared their scary ordeal with us have now retained an attorney and said they've been advised not to make any further public comments.